This recording is suited for GCSE Design and Technology. This is a Year 10 mini project following basically the idea of a non-examined assessment, where you would do it in school. You might also sort of refer to that as coursework in the old days. So basically, this is an AQA mark scheme for the full 50% of the GCSE, and it breaks down into different sections. Now, in the Year 10 assignment, I'm not necessarily going to follow all of these quite so thoroughly as you would do in Year 11, because I'm not going to give you the time. The design challenge, what's assessed? It's a single design and make activity. You're provided with 3 contextual challenges set by the exam board. Now at the bottom, we've got 3 here. These are not from the exam board. One of them is actually, but these are not from the exam board. So that you can feel free to kind of use these as a starting point. But that's how it would be presented for you. Something with 3 or 4 words. That's all the information you get from the exam board. The rest of it is down to the student themselves to work out what needs to be created, what needs to be produced. The exam board give you the example of 20 pages of A3 or A4. Certainly for a mini NEA, we're not going to do 20 pages. But it's very difficult to pin it down these days in a digital age of pages. It's the equivalent of 20 pages, but who knows? It's whatever's necessary to get the task done. I've greyed out this box here, 30 to 35 hours. I think that's too long for a mini NEA, so I would be saying that we're looking at probably 4 weeks to 5 weeks on a project broken down into individual tasks. Depends how many hours you get. So for me, this feels like a sort of a 15-hour to 20-hour task at most. And I'm going to show you some information that I think is useful. I'm moving to Onshape. Now, any CAD package is suitable for doing this sort of thing. I'm moving to Onshape because it's available online and it runs within the cloud, which means that it almost doesn't matter what device you're working on. Now, I come from Pro Engineer, Inventor, Pro Desktop, all sorts of other bits of software. Onshape is very, very similar. I've spent about 2 hours on it so far. And it's a really, really good package. There's some limitations, but it's really good. But if you're using other CAD packages, it's absolutely fine. But I think Onshape is a good one to look at. Google SketchUp is a good one. I liked Onshape when I looked at the technical drawing capability. I thought that was really useful. There are other links that you might find useful that are on my YouTube channel. This document, if you were to click on those, it would play it. If you're looking at this YouTube video, you will see that there is a playlist on my YouTube channel that you can look at and find all sorts of information to support that might be relevant. Okay, so let's go on to the actual task. Now, the first thing that we're going to do, it's 10 marks, which is a relatively small amount of marks in the real NEA, but actually if you get this bit wrong, the rest of it begins to fall apart. If you get this bit right, the rest of the project will go really smoothly. Okay, so let's just talk about what the activity is. These are the mark bands. Let's go for a top end. Design possibilities are identified and explored. That means you think around the task a little bit and link back to the challenge. So remember, those contextual challenges are, in this case, working from home, teenage lifestyle, green products for the home. That's the contextual challenge. And then you have to understand the problem. You have to demonstrate that you understand what the need is for that product. This is the bit where students really seem to struggle with it. And again, if you don't do this bit right, the rest of the project is really, really hard. A user or client has been clearly identified that is relevant in all aspects of the challenge. Okay, so what you're doing is you're finding someone who genuinely needs this product or genuinely needs a solution, and you're meeting the needs of that person. And if you don't do this right at the beginning, it's very, very difficult to get it right. Even companies that aren't working with specific clients would have all sorts of profiles of people that they've worked with before, so they would know the customer's needs and wants and make sure that they meet those. Comprehensive investigation into the work of others that helps you come up with your design ideas, and then thinking about things all the way through, such as economic and social effects of your product. Is it a good product or a morally not so good product? Okay, and then your investigation has to be throughout. So all the way through this, I'm going to say to you, is this good enough? Have you given enough information? Have you thought about doing it with less materials? Have you thought about reducing the cost? Have you thought about making it more environmentally friendly? So that is exploring and justifying design ideas is based on that. So that's the sort of preamble of the whole project. What I'm going to do now, we're going to start this activity, which I think is a really fun thing to do. which is to do your mind map of possible design projects. Now, here's my format. I've presented this to my students, but you could work on paper. That doesn't really matter. I think you need to explore each of those 3 briefs as a mind map before you do anything else, because you might come up with an idea for this one that actually works really well for that one, or you might come up with a blend of them that's really good. So by just thinking around your possible design briefs, it's a little bit like a team of designers or engineers or architects sitting around having a brainstorming session, trying to work out how they can bring a new product to market. And so mind mapping is a really, really valid exercise. So into the nuts and bolts, I'm going to do a worked example of 2 different options of working from home. Okay, currently I'm filming this in January 2021, so we are locked down, so working from home. So what I do, this is me working online on PowerPoint, so some of my functionality is limited. If I wanted more, I can open it in the desktop app, but I create a text box. So one of the first things I do would be to do where is it? Insert text box, and then that drops down a text box, and then you start typing. Okay, the other thing that I like to have with this is I like to bring in an arrow, and then I manipulate that arrow, because I think this information needs to be clear and it needs to be linked carefully. And if you don't present it properly in the first place, it's really difficult to make it readable, and for the person marking it to see what you're talking about, and for you to refer back to it. So let's get it set up properly first of all. So there's an arrow. Now normally what I would do would be to hold, I think it's the Alt key whilst I'm dragging it. It doesn't seem to work in the online version, so I'm going to do Control C and Control V, give myself a spare arrow, jiggle it around. Okay, then Control C, Control V, and another arrow, and jiggle it around. So if I was to come up with 6 ideas, just thinking very quickly and purely in terms of ICT usage now, if I now take those 3, I can do Control C, Control V, and that gives me 3 all in one go. Now if I, being a little bit of a fusspot here, if I group them, I can actually rotate all those 3 arrows, and suddenly I've got 6 boxes. So that's quite a quick keyboard shortcut. Control C copies, Control V paste. And then so working from home. Now what I'm going to try and do is to give a problem. Okay, so here's a problem that I've personally got, is stuff is everywhere. Okay, now remember this is working stuff. It might be that stuff's everywhere anyway, but I'm thinking about working stuff. I'll type these up properly when you're not busy watching me jabbering away at you. So stuff is everywhere. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to go Control V. So that was Control C, Control V. Let's put this one over here. So another problem with working from home is going to be, I'm going to call it noise pollution and distraction. Sometimes when you're working from home it's lovely, but it also means that you're going to have whatever's going on in your house is going to be a potential distraction to you. So that could be an area where we can help solve a problem. Let's come up with one more problem. Working from home, I think it's going to be routines. Here's another one, that's an interesting one. Routines. So what I mean by that is getting up, getting to work, making a cup of coffee, doing what you need to do at the right time, in the right place, making sure you're on your online meetings, or making sure that your phone is charged and ready to go. Oh, that's another one. Let's do that. Let's think about, here's a problem. I'm going to write as a problem technology charging. Right, that's quite an interesting one. Technology charging. We've all got probably sticking out of a plug socket somewhere a 5-volt USB charger, but these days they're becoming more products are running off them. So maybe your LED lights under your bed are running off a 5-volt charger, or maybe your battery charger for your remote control car or your drone is running off a 5-volt charger. So the technology charging is quite an interesting one to look at. Right. So I'm not going to do all of these because that's something you don't need to watch. Now what I then do is I start to think, well, what might my possible solution be? I've given myself a problem that I'll investigate properly later on, but what's my possible solution? So now I'm going to just take an arrow again. I'm going to do Control C and Control V, and I'm going to give myself off each of these. Control V gives me another one. Control V gives me another one. Right, so I've now got, coming off my first thought, there's my problem. Okay, now what I need to do is to think about how I might solve that. And I'm not trying to come up with a fully fledged design, I'm just thinking broadly, what might I do with this project? And I can always add to it later on. Right, I've just copied and pasted a text box. As I say, normally you can do Alt and drag and it'll give you an extra one if you're on the desktop, on your main one. Right, so stuff is everywhere, routine, stuff is everywhere. I'm going to do I'm going to write briefcase. I don't really want a briefcase, but that might be a solution, briefcase or storage bag. I'm going to write tray for sofa. I actually genuinely want to. I quite often work at the sofa and stuff falls down the side or falls off the arm of the chair, so a tray for the sofa might be a good idea. Tray, or I'm going to change that to drawer for the sofa. Ooh, a drawer in your sofa, yuck. And then stuff is everywhere. Let's do one more. I'm going to do here, just underneath. I'm going to do clips. Big fan of clips and magnets on a rack. So like some sort of racking system. I don't really know, I haven't really explored the problem yet to know what I'm having problem with stuff. But what I do know is I might have clips and magnets on a rack for small items. Now, already doing this, and I genuinely hadn't thought of that until I was doing this. That's poor planning, isn't it? On this now, I'm going to start thinking about maybe what I could do or what I might put into it. I could actually come out further if you wanted to be really thorough. So if you're a target grade 9 student or 8 student, or even if you just want to be really thorough with this, you might want to come out again. I would suggest you do off each of these now and come up with what it might be storing. So again, look, I'm using Control C, Control V. Sorry, for many of you, you're probably really good at using IT, and for others, you haven't done it as much, so I think it's worth just teaching you these basics. So if you look at my flow now, working from home, one of my problems is stuff is everywhere. I might use clips and magnets on a rack for small items, and they might hold things like pens and pencils. For me, pens and pencils are a key part of what I do, and I do love a organisation system for my pens and pencils. And what else might I do? Wires and cables. Ooh. So again, this isn't earth-shattering in terms of the big idea. I'm not going to save the planet with this, but as a problem goes, things like wires and cables, they really get in the way. Or when you need the one that you need, you can't find it because somebody else has walked off with it. So maybe some sort of organisation system for all these various wires we have in our wireless world. Okay, so if you look at how I've got this organised now, as I say, I'm not going to make you watch me do all of this because it's tedious. Working from home, my problem is that stuff is everywhere. Possibly use a briefcase, possibly a tray or a drawer for the sofa, possibly clips or magnets on a rack. On this one, and I would do it for the others as well, on this one I've come out and I've written pens and pencils and wires and cables. Those are the things that I would be organising. So it's already beginning to turn into quite a range of possible products that I might design, but I still haven't decided. I've still got loads of work to do. So for me, the end of this activity really is you having a fully completed mind map for each of your 3 possible. We call these contexts. Each of the contexts. Now, move things around as you go, making sure it's easy to read. The other thing that I sometimes do is color code my arrows by using my fill. Where's my there it is. Okay, so I've just changed the color of my arrows there to a nice red. So let's change that one to a red as well. Okay, so I'm going to leave this at this point. This is not where you should leave it. I just spent quite a long time adding extra bits to it. So I've now got 3 contexts: working from home, green products for the home, and teenage lifestyle. Each of those 3 contexts has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 possible projects coming out of it. And what each of those possible projects should then do is to break down into the kind of, or possible problems should break down into what you might think about focusing your investigation and your design on. Okay, so if I give you the example over here of green products for the home, kitchen waste was a problem. One option was a chute to rubbish, which would mean basically instead of having a bin in your room, you have something where you just chuck it down a chute in your apartment and it would disappear off into some sort of communal rubbish collection, or maybe that's some sort of recycling system. I thought maybe chopping board waste collector, maybe at the time when you're chopping and preparing ingredients, maybe there's a waste collection system that could be a part of that. I actually saw an exhibition where the modernists right back in the 1920s and 30s were developing these sort of new ways of living, and there were some really neat designs for how you collected kitchen waste straight into a lead or a tin lined bucket. So it's not a new idea, that, but I think that's quite an interesting one. And then some sort of domestic compost system. Compost heaps are just piles of stuff in your back garden usually, but maybe that would be worth looking at from maybe a small flat or someone with only a balcony. So really trying to sort of narrow that down and make it more viable for people that don't have a lot of space. Don't know, that's just off the top of my head, having to think about that. So what I need you to do for this part of the project is to get your head stuck into a mind map. It's all on one page here. If you run out of space, I would suggest you work smaller and try and keep it on one page. But if it moves on to an individual mind map on each page or whatever, then in which case right click over on it's called the slide deck here, and do new slide, and that'll give you a blank slide to work on if you need to do that. Remember, Control C will copy, Control V will paste. You saw me there using the edit and group quite often to duplicate things and move things around and then ungroup them. These are all good practice now. So you should have quite a lot of content on this sheet, and you should by the end of this have quite a good idea about what you're doing. This took me, if I was to finish this is at least an hour long job, at least, probably more like 2 hours if I put something at the end of each one of these arrows and added these extra arrows in, which I'm expecting you to do. That's probably an hour and a half's worth of work. It's quite interesting once you get into it, but if you need to go and have a cup of coffee and come back to it, that's what I'm expecting, about an hour's worth of work. I am expecting it to be done onto a digital format. Even if you end up doing parts of it by hand, that should then be copied onto a digital format. In this day and age, I think that's where we're going. So good luck with that. The next thing that we're going to look at is going to be trying to add a bit of detail to your intended user, your target market. So that'll be in another presentation. But if you get to this point, you're doing pretty well. The only thing that's missing from this that I'm not going to touch on at the moment, ideally, would be to do some sort of summary about what you've found out and what's good or bad about your method and your idea. And I think if you're a grade 9 target student, you ought to be doing that as a matter of course anyway, summarising the activity that you've just done and giving yourself some next steps. As a result of finding this out, or as a result of thinking about this, I'm going to do this next. All right, this is quite a nice thing to do. Enjoy it. Be creative as well. Don't get too stuck in a rut.